Hey everybody, Melon here. Welcome back to another teardown video. Today we're going to be doing a teardown of the Incott Ghero. Thank you very much again to MechKeys, who was kind enough to send this unit out for me to take a look at and inadvertently also tear down. Now, as I talked about in my review, this is a very unique mouse that does do some things good and some things not so good. I did say in the review that the Ghero Pro is most likely going to be the better get, and I'm going to assume the internal construction of the teardown is going to be exact same for that mouse, but there may be some differences. So if you are looking to take apart the Ghero Pro, just keep in mind there may be some internal differences despite the mice being pretty much one for one. There may be some differences on the inside, so don't take this guide one for one. If you're taking apart the regular Ghero, this guide will be all you need. Now, as always, before we do any teardowns, you will need a couple things. You will need a set of precision screwdriver bits. All the screws in here are, I believe, just starhead screws, so they're all pretty standard, but having a precision bit for some smaller ones will be greatly helpful. And you'll also need somebody to keep track of your screws. I like to use an ice cube tray, but you can use pretty much whatever you want. Also, just having a towel is handy just to keep the mouse propped up in the proper position. All right, but once you have everything, you are ready to go. We can go ahead and start our teardown of the Incott Ghero. All right, now to get started, you will need just a regular size starhead screw here, maybe a little on the smaller side, to open the unit up. Now, to do this, you will need to remove the stock skates on the top and the bottom of the mouse, but this is very easy to do so as there are skate removal ramps, and the BTL stocks that are on here are pretty bad anyway, so that's not that big of a deal. So you can go ahead and remove the screw here and screw here. Then you can go ahead and take your fingernail and just run along the side of the mouse, and that will release all the clamps. This mouse does come apart pretty easily. Now, once you get it open, the top of the mouse will probably hold together. That is because there are prongs at the top. So you need to pull the mouse out from the bottom like this and just shimmy it down gently, and it will pop off just like that. You can see there are the two little hooks towards the mouse there. Now, there is a ribbon cable connecting the top shell to the bottom shell here, but thankfully, unlike some recent mice we've covered, this one is actually a standard clip connector, which is a welcome sight. So you can just take your fingernail, pop this clip connector open, and just gently pull this ribbon cable out, and you can separate the top and the bottom shells. Very, very easy to open, and it's very easy to take this off and reseat this cable, which is a lovely attention to detail. Now, I'm going to put the base aside for now. We'll talk about that in a minute. Let's talk about this top shell first. Now, the base shell is also very easy to work on. Now, one thing I wanted to highlight here is I absolutely love that there's a clip connector here. That is such a nice thing to see. There's no push connectors on either side, so it's very, very easy to replace this cable if it gets damaged. Also, another really cool attention to detail, there is a big block of foam here that acts as kind of like a resting point on top of the battery here to prevent it from slipping around, which is another really, really nice attention to detail. As I said in my full review, the build quality in this mouse is actually surprisingly good for its price, and you're going to see a lot more really nice attention to details like that as we go through this teardown. Now, first off, we're going to go ahead and remove the side button PCB. So we have to remove a screw here, 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 and here. Now, once those screws are gone, you can basically just grab this PCB and it will just gently pop out of the shell just like this, and you can move it all in one piece. And then here we have the Wano green dot buttons for the top DPI button and also the two side buttons as well, as I talked about in the full review. We can put that off to the side for now. Now, the side buttons here are very, very simple, pretty much the same as a lot of other side buttons we've already taken apart on the channel. So what you want to do is just take two fingers and you want to press the side buttons into the shell just like this, and then you just want to get your finger and just grab one of the edges here, and they will pop off just in one solid piece, just like that. So we'll put that off to the side for now. Next up, we can go and remove the main click. So we just have to remove a screw here and a screw here. And then once those are out, just like a lot of main clicks we do, you want to get your finger and just kind of pop off this bottom standoff, and the clicks will just fall out of the shell. Nice and easy, it'll just pop right out. And then you can just take them out, and there you have your main clicks. Very, very, very easy to take apart, which is a great attention to detail. Now, there is also this top button on here, which is the DPI button. Now, this is held in by a clip. I'm not going to remove this just because I don't really like these plastic clips and they tend to break very easily. So you can remove this if you want to, but I would leave it intact just because these little plastic clips have a habit of breaking. But that is everything for the top shell of the Incott Ghero. Very, very easy to disassemble. Nothing really too tricky in here aside from this plastic clip, but very, very easy to service overall, which is wonderful to see. Let's go ahead and start with the base next. All right, now next up, we can go ahead and start with the base here. Now, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and remove the battery here. So we're going to just get a fingernail on both sides of this connector, and you're just going to gently wiggle it up and it will pop out very easily. And then we can disconnect power to the board. Now, next up, we can go ahead and remove the board itself. So we have to remove a screw from here, here, and two screws here at the top of the unit here and here. Now, before we take the main board out, we do have to take off one more thing. You can see here that there is a little bit of an LED header inside the scroll wheel here. We have to remove this piece before we take the scroll wheel out. So you're going to go ahead and remove the screw at the top here. Now that you have the screw, you're going to go ahead and you're going to pull this out. Now, as you can see here, these pins sit into this socket on the bottom of the board here. So you have to kind of pull this out and at an angle, if that makes sense. So what I found the best way to do this is just grab the board by the side and make sure you hold the board down and just gently wiggle this up, and it should come off in just one piece. This is the same kind of connector type we saw in the G3M, just a little easier to remove, which is great to see. All right, now that has been removed, you can go ahead and pull off your main board. board. So just grab the main clicks by the side and you can pull straight up, as I mentioned before, and the entire board comes off in one piece. Now you can also take out the scroll wheel if you want to. You can just grab it from the side and just gently pull it out of its holder just like this. Again, you can leave it intact, but you can remove it if you want to replace it or change it out for something else. Very easy to do so. And then here we have the main board. Nothing too really fancy here to talk about. It's a pretty standard main board implementation. The one thing I did want to note though is on the bottom there is a slider here, so make sure you leave this in the proper position. If your unit is set to off, it will be all the way to the top. If it's on, it will be on the middle, or it'll be on the hertz in the bottom. So again, make sure this is set to off. This little plug here coordinates to the slider on the bottom of the mouse here, as you can see here. So just make sure that this slider stays in the up position when you go to put this unit back together. You can of course take this out if you want to, but you don't have to. But that is everything for the base reassembly here on the Incott Ghero. Let's go ahead and start the reassembly process. All right, so reassembly process is going to be pretty straightforward. First off, we're going to go ahead and we're going to take our scroll wheel. We're going to take the small end here and we're going to thread it into this orange hole in our encoder. So you're just going to kind of wiggle it in here and then just gently line it up as best you can with the scroll wheel and just push in. Make sure not to push it in all the way, because if you push it in too far, it may interfere with the standoffs here for the scroll wheel. So just make sure you just kind of push it in about halfway. Once that's done, we can go ahead and put the main board back into the base of the unit. But as I mentioned before, make sure that this is in the off position, and you also want to make sure that this slider is also in the off position before you put the board back in. We'll move this battery cable out of the way. We'll take our main board here and we'll just gently throw it on top of the standoffs here at the top there. So you want to line up the scroll wheel and just gently put it into place. Now, before you force it down, go onto the bottom of the unit and just make sure that this is actually actuating properly. If for whatever reason the board isn't sitting evenly or it's not going down all the way, or this switch isn't working, it's probably because this switch slid. So make sure this is in the off position, and again, make sure the bottom switch is in the same position. Once that's done, we can go ahead and we can put back in our screws to secure the main board. All right, and then once that's done, just make sure your board is sitting flat. Make sure the USB-C port is lined up with its plastic shell here. If everything's even, you are good to go. Next up, we can go ahead and put the threader back in for the RGB here. So we're going to go ahead and grab this threader. So how you want to put this back in is you want to just kind of gently slide it into the scroll wheel. I'm going to show you this the best I can. So you want to kind of gently slide it into the scroll wheel. And then once it's inside the scroll wheel, you want to line up the standoffs and just gently push it down until it makes contact with that plastic standoff there. I hope that makes sense. And then once that's done, we can go ahead and put in that anchoring screw again. And then lastly, all we have to do is reconnect our battery. We can do this by taking this 3-pin connector here and just gently lining it up with this hole here. Sometimes it can be a little finicky. Once you get it roughly seated, take 2 of your fingernails and just press down on the sides and you are good to go. Now, before we go forward, what I would do is I would recommend turning the unit on, connecting it to your computer, and just making sure the unit turns on. Make sure your scroll wheel still works. Make sure the scroll wheel LED still works. Double check your main clicks. Just make sure everything is seated properly. If the scroll wheel RGB isn't working for some reason, this is probably improperly seated. And if the board isn't working at all, this 3-pin is most likely not working either. So just make sure you seat this properly to prevent any issues. But that is all for the base. Let's go ahead and do the top shell next. Now, this is going to be pretty straightforward, just like a lot of teardowns we've done. This is going to be pretty easy. What you want to do is you want to take your main clicks, you want to feed them into the top of the shell via this hole here, and then you flip the unit over. And what you want to do is you want to make sure that this little hollow piece here goes over this plastic standoff right here. So feed it in from the bottom, and you just want to make sure it sits in properly. Once it's over, you can push it back, and then it should line up with the standoff. So you can take your finger and just press it into place, and your main clicks will go back into place. I will do the same thing for the next click. We'll go ahead, feed it in through the bottom just like this. We'll go ahead, make sure this top contact makes contact like that, and we just press it down and put it into place. Now, next up, we can go ahead and put in our retention screws. However, just as a warning I give to everyone when you do this, you have to be very, very careful in putting in retention screws. If you over tighten them, you will break your main clicks, so they won't rebound. If you under tighten them, they won't work either. So just make sure you put these in, screw them in until you feel feedback. Do not over tighten them or torque them, as you will damage your main clicks. You can check you did this correctly by checking your main clicks. They should kind of hover like this, and they should just go down a little bit when you put some pressure on them. If they're stuck to the top like this and they won't go down, that means you've over tightened them. And if they're stuck on the bottom, that means you've under tightened them. Again, be very, very, very careful when putting these screws in. You want to make sure you stop once you feel any feedback from the screw. Next up, we can go ahead and put back in our side clicks. This is very, very easy to do. What you want to do is you want to take the corner of this connector and stick it into this connector here. So just like that. And then you want to do the same thing on the other side. Now you will most likely have to pick this up and carry it over, just kind of like that. And that will fit them back into place. It can be a little finicky to do this sometimes, but they should naturally just go right back into place. And then lastly, we can go ahead and re-put back on our side button PCB. Very, very easy. All these little white circles have their own standoffs here. So all you do is just kind of gently match it into the side of the shell. Should naturally fit on just like that. And then once that's done, just double check to make sure your side buttons still click. If the actuation feels normal and they have a nice snappy click, then you have put them in properly. Well, that is it for the top shell and the base shell. Let's go ahead and put them back together. Now, this is very easy to do. What you're going to do is you're going to flip this to the up position just like this, and then you're just going to take the blue side of this ribbon cable and gently line it up inside this connector. I'll do my best to show you on the camera, but it may be a little small. Just like that. It should naturally just kind of seat itself in halfway. Again, with all ribbon cables, make sure it's even. If it's uneven, it will cause problems. And then once it's in, you just want to clip down this piece of plastic and you are all connected and you are good to go. Now, at this point, what I recommend is just quickly turn the mouse on to the bottom, make sure the side buttons still actuate, the DPI button works. If they don't work, reseat this ribbon cable. It may not be even, or there could be some other issue with it, but it should just go in naturally very, very easily. And then once that's done, you can go ahead and put the top shell and the bottom shell back together. Now remember, up at the top, there are these little hooks here. So you do kind of have to do a bit of a sandwich here where you just kind of hook it in from the front. Once the top is roughly making contact like this, just hold the mouse over, push it down, and it should click into place. You can run a finger along the side of the mouse to make sure everything's made contact, but it should clip together no problem. And then you can go ahead and put back in your base screws. And with that, you have successfully disassembled and reassembled the Incott Ghero. Overall, a very, very easy unit of service. I'm actually really, really impressed with how good the build quality is and how good the overall construction and the serviceability of this mouse is, which is welcome to see. Incredibly easy to swap the battery or any other components you need to swap, which is a lovely, lovely thing to see. Overall, I'm very, very impressed. Incott has done a great job in designing this mouse. But that is going to be everything for today's teardown video. Thank you very much again to Meckkeys, who was kind enough to send the Incott Ghero over for review. I greatly appreciate it. If you guys enjoyed the teardown, want to see more teardowns like this, I do teardowns for all the mice I cover on the channel. I will be doing a full teardown of the HSK from Gwills as well in the near future. So if you want to see how that mouse is taken apart, and of course any other mouse I cover here on the channel, be sure to get subscribed here so you don't miss any future teardown videos. But that's everything for today. Thanks again to Meckkeys for sending this over for me to take a look at. I greatly appreciate it, and I'll catch you all in the next teardown video. Peace.